The steam from the shower fogged up the mirror, but I could still see his silhouette through the glass. My heart raced as I realized my grandfather was watching me. I should have felt disgusted, violated even. But instead, a thrill ran through my body. That night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, the air crackled with unspoken tension. One look, one touch, and suddenly we were crossing a line we could never come back from. This is the story of how I gave in to temptation and the price I'm still paying for it. I stood frozen, water cascading down my body, as I realized the shadowy figure outside the shower wasn't just my imagination. The familiar outline of my grandfather's stooped shoulders sent a jolt through me. My heart raced, thoughts stumbling over each other as I tried to make sense of what was happening. This ordinary morning routine had suddenly become anything but ordinary. My first instinct was to cover myself, to shrink away from his gaze. But as the seconds ticked by, something unexpected stirred within me. The steam-filled bathroom became a crucible, melting away the boundaries I'd always taken for granted. I found myself caught between two opposing forces, the disgust I knew I should feel and an electric thrill I couldn't ignore. As I stood there, letting the water continue its path down my skin, I wrestled with conflicting desires. Part of me wanted to shout, to confront him, to wrap myself in a towel and run. But another part, a part I hardly recognized, wanted to stay, to be seen. The moral dilemma weighed heavily on me, each option feeling simultaneously right and wrong. My racing thoughts alternated between shock and a confusing excitement. I never looked at my grandfather as anything other than family. Yet here I was, pulse quickening not just from fear, but from something else entirely. The forbidden nature of the moment only seemed to heighten every sensation. I found myself torn between two choices, each loaded with consequence. Should I cover up, pretend this never happened? Or should I let the show continue, crossing a line I knew we could never come back from? The decision felt monumental, like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the next step would change everything. Finally, I turned off the water. The sudden silence was deafening. I stepped out of the shower, heart pounding so hard I was sure he must hear it. Wrapping myself in a towel, I wondered if I had imagined it all. But the lingering tension in the air told me otherwise. Everything had changed. As I stood there, dripping onto the bathroom tiles, a new worry crept in. How would I face him at dinner? The thought of sitting across the table from him, pretending nothing had happened, seemed impossible. Yet the alternative, acknowledging what had transpired, felt equally daunting. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever came next, knowing that our relationship would never be the same again. The dining room felt smaller than ever as we sat down to eat, the air thick with unspoken words. I tried to act normal, but the weight of what had happened in the shower earlier pressed down on me like a physical force. My grandfather's familiar presence across the table now felt alien, charged with a new and dangerous energy. As we began to eat, I found myself hyper-aware of every movement, every sound. The clink of silverware against plates seemed unnaturally loud in the strained silence. I struggled to swallow each bite, my appetite replaced by an annoying sense of anticipation and dread. What were we doing? What would happen next? My grandfather attempted casual conversation, his voice sounding strained and unfamiliar. "How was your day, Jennifer?" he asked, the once comfortable question now loaded with unspoken meaning. I mumbled a response, unable to meet his eyes. The change between us was palpable, turning this routine family dinner into an exquisite form of torture. As the meal progressed, I found myself noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. The way his hands moved as he cut his food, the curve of his neck as he took a sip of water. Each accidental brush of fingers as we reached for the salt became electric, sending shivers through my body. Our eyes would meet for a fraction of a second before darting away, the lingering glances conveying more than words ever could. The weight of our shared secret threatened to suffocate us both. What had once been a comfortable family home now felt like a minefield of potential confrontations and slip-ups. Every creak of the house, every distant sound became a potential discovery of the unspoken thing between us. As we finished eating, the tension had built to an almost unbearable level. We stood to clear the table, and suddenly, everything changed. Our hands brushed as we reached for the same plate, and this time, neither of us pulled away. Time seemed to stand still as our eyes met, dishes forgotten. We stood frozen in that moment of electric possibility, teetering on the edge of no return. My heart raced, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body. The air between us crackled with unspoken desire, years of familial love twisting into something unrecognizable and thrilling. In that instant, I knew we were about to cross a line that would change everything forever. As night settled over the house, a charged silence filled the air. The living room, once a place of innocent family gatherings, now held a different energy. I found myself alone with my grandfather, the weight of our unspoken desires hanging between us. At first, our touches were hesitant, almost accidental. A brush of hands as we reached for the remote, a slight lean that brought our bodies closer. Each contact sent electricity coursing through me. I could feel my heart racing, my breath catching in my throat. Part of me wanted to run, to break this spell before it was too late. But a stronger, more primal part kept me rooted to the spot. As our inhibitions melted away, our touches grew bolder. His hand on my knee, my fingers tracing the lines of his face, features I'd known all my life now took on a new, thrilling dimension. I was torn between the intoxication of the moment and the looming consequences I knew would follow. Every rational thought screamed at me to stop, but my body had other ideas. Years of familial love twisted into something unrecognizable yet irresistible. I saw desire flare in my grandfather's eyes, transforming him from the man who had bounced me on his knee to someone entirely new. As clothing fell away, so did the last vestiges of our former relationship. There was no going back now. In the dim light, our bodies came together in a tangle of passion and forbidden love. The taboo nature of our encounter only seemed to heighten every sensation. Amidst the heat and urgency, there were moments of surprising tenderness, a gentle caress, a whispered endearment. These flashes of intimacy added layers of complexity to what we were doing, making it both more beautiful and more heartbreaking. Afterward, we lay tangled together, the reality of what we'd done slowly seeping back in. A tidal wave of emotions crashed over me: guilt, shame, confusion, and a lingering desire that refused to be silenced. I knew that come morning, we'd have to face the consequences of this night. But for now, in the quiet aftermath of our passion, I allowed myself to simply feel the warmth of his embrace, the beat of his heart against mine, and the knowledge that everything had changed forever. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, illuminating the stark reality of what we'd done. I woke up, my body aching in unfamiliar ways, as the events of the night before crashed over me in waves of memory. Every creak in the house, every distant sound became a potential discovery of our secret. My heart raced with each noise, convinced that at any moment our transgression would be exposed. As I examined myself in the mirror, my body bore the physical reminders of our encounter. Each mark was a mix of shame and lingering desire, a visual representation of the line we'd crossed. I traced them with trembling fingers, torn between disgust and a confusing longing for more. The once comfortable family home now felt like a minefield of potential confrontations and slip-ups. Every room held memories of innocent times now tainted by our actions. I tiptoed through the house, afraid that even the walls might whisper our secret. Trying to go about my day was an exercise in anxiety. Every interaction with my grandfather was laden with unspoken weight. A simple good morning became a complex dance of avoiding eye contact and keeping a safe distance. The air between us crackled with tension, filled with words we couldn't say and touches we shouldn't crave. In a moment alone in the kitchen, the full weight of our actions hit me. This wasn't just about one night of passion. It was about the potential unraveling of our entire family. I gripped the counter, overwhelmed by a wave of what I now recognize as postcoital dysphoria. The conflict between the pleasure of our encounter and the societal taboo we'd broken left me feeling hollow and anxious. I realized that while one night might be hidden, a continued affair would be impossible to conceal. The constant state of hypervigilance, always feeling under scrutiny, was already taking its toll. Every family gathering, every holiday would become an exercise in deception and fear. As I stood there, I knew I had to make a decision. The coping mechanisms of avoidance and denial I'd been using since waking up weren't sustainable. This wasn't just about me and my grandfather anymore. It was about the long-term effects on our entire family dynamic. The potential for estrangement and ongoing psychological trauma loomed large. In that moment, I understood that sometimes protecting yourself means walking away from everything you've known. The price of our moment of abandon would be paid in years of secrecy, guilt, and the constant fear of discovery. Some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. And now, I had to live with the consequences of our actions, forever changed by one night of forbidden passion. In the quiet aftermath of our passion, I found myself grappling with a truth I'd always known, but never truly understood. Some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. The weight of our actions settled heavily on my shoulders, a burden I knew I'd carry for years to come. Our moment of abandon would exact a steep price, paid in endless days of secrecy, gnawing guilt, and the constant, paralyzing fear of discovery. As I stood in my childhood bedroom, packing my bags, I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. I understood now that protecting myself meant walking away from everything I'd ever known. It wasn't just about escaping a toxic environment. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, my sense of self. With each item I placed in my suitcase, I was taking a step towards regaining stability in my life. The decision to leave wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I knew that processing this experience would take time, support, and probably professional help. But for now, I focused on the act of leaving, each folded shirt and packed memento a small act of self-preservation. As I zipped up my bag, I took one last look around the room, allowing myself to grieve for the normalcy I was leaving behind. Then, with a deep breath, I turned towards the door and my uncertain future.